Welcome, wives. It's Liz. In my video about how we are refined by relationships, I mentioned a verse, and it is actually Philippians 2:12. And the B part of it says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. We are made for community, but our walk with Jesus is so personal, and it takes us continuing to work it out with fear and trembling. Here's my message for you today, wives. You are not the Holy Spirit. So do not police your husband's relationship with the Lord. I find that God, in his wisdom, has made men and women very different. In fact, I was talking to a man several years ago, an older man who I sat next to on a flight, and he said that the biggest difference within humanity is not race or class, economic position. He said it's between men and women. And the longer that I live, the more I see that there was a lot of wisdom in that. I believe that God designed us uniquely different in many different ways. And one of these ways is in spirituality. Men have a very different way that they come to spirituality than women do. And I believe that God made that so that there'd be a balance. I grew up as a pastor's kid. My dad has been a pastor my whole life. He's retired now. Within my own marriage, my husband is not a pastor. He's a good church attender. He has his own walk with the Lord, but he's not that guy. So sometimes in my marriage, I thought, is this just a matter of us being totally on different pages? Is it because he's just not super spiritual? But then I think back to my upbringing, and I realize that, you think a pastor, that must be someone who's super spiritual and like into God stuff with all he's got. But to be honest, my mom's spirituality was so much more vivid than my dad's, and he was the pastor. So what that tells me is that there are just inherent differences in the way we approach God as men and as women. There are just differences there. And I don't think that that's something to cause us as women, as wives, to look down on our husbands, because to be honest, our expectations are just wild these days. It's not just that we want a Christian, we want him to also be, like into fasting and to be the spiritual leader and all these things. Listen, your husband is not Jesus. And guess what? Neither are you. Neither am I. My husband is not Jesus and I am not Jesus. We're both sinners in this thing. We're both walking with the Lord, and he is refining us. So I believe that these days we have married our Disney impressions of what love and marriage are meant to look like with our already lofty Christian expectations of what our husband is going to be. And it just causes an impossible situation for our husbands. So let's have some grace and allow God to work in his own way in our husbands' lives. Here's an example. I love K-Love radio. In the car, if I'm driving, it's gonna be K-Love because I wanna keep myself encouraged. I want the kids to have these songs running through their brains. My husband cannot stand so many of the songs on K-Love. He says they're just so overly emotive and breathy. It's the way the man saying, it's just so breathy. And he's always making fun of it. And sometimes I'm just like, Lord, what's that about? But this is praising you, If you have something like that with your husband, give it to God. The Holy Spirit can work all that out. We are not the Holy Spirit. We can't, it's not our job to police our husband's relationship with Christ. It's not our job to police even our children's relationship with Christ or anyone else's. The verse says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Let us leave the Holy Spirit to do what the Holy Spirit does. And let's walk in obedience and look first at, Lord, what are you doing in me? And trust that as he's working in us, he's also working in our husbands. We'll see you in the next video.